I am so delighted to be back, and I'm really delighted to finish this particular series because it's been instrumental in my life, in what I do as a coach, how I use it in the world with clients, with friends, but mostly with myself. What if up? It obviously, as your board president just mentioned, is transformational. Not only on an individual basis, but a collective. And, last week we talked a little bit more about non-attachment, letting go. And I said, sounds simple enough. We practice it all the time, and yet we have to continue to practice it all the time. Mindy mentions in her book the old joke, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? What's the answer? Practice, practice, practice. I was reading again in her book this last week when she talks about and defines non-attachment. She says this: the ability to let go of the need to change, fix, or control outer circumstances. And she goes on to say, it is the missing secret that allows your dreams to unfold into reality. And that particular word struck me, reality. If my dreams, my desires, my hopes, my wants are unfolding into reality, what is reality? Because isn't it true that we often have great words, great sentences, great phrases in our language, and yet we don't quite use them as if it were truth with a capital T? So what is your definition of reality? And as I began to explore what that means for me, I noticed that every time I was writing the word reality, as I write a lot, blogging and journaling, I often capitalize certain words. For instance, truth. When it is truth absolute, I capitalize that word. It is as if it's another name for God. Same with love, with life. And I noticed I was capitalizing the word reality as if it were another name for God. Because isn't it true that reality rules? As much as you would like to fight with it and argue with it, it's still going to win every single time. So when you see the title of today's talk, Reality Is, did you attach a story to that? Is it a good story? Notice that there are 4 dots after that, as if I meant reality is, and that's the last, that's the period, that's all that it takes for that to be a complete sentence. It just is. Love is, truth is, God is, reality is. Albert Einstein once said, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And Mindy talks on page 160 of her book. Essentially, we've been taught to create our lives by hacking away at the frozen, icy block of our physical reality. We put our focus on all the things we don't like about our lives, and we try to chip away at them. We hope and pray that if we work really hard carving out those imperfections of our existence, we will eventually manifest a masterpiece. Isn't it true that we have been trained throughout the course of our life experience out of alignment with the truth? It's as if we have to untrain ourselves. We've been taught lots of things, and I'm not here to teach you anything. I've never been a teacher. I am more an unteacher. I'm here to help you unlearn what you've been taught all of your life. Mindy says, our current reality, it seems, is not here because we chiseled it into being. Our current reality is the result of a universe of ideas flowing into a construct by our individual and collective consciousness. She continues to talk about that change thing, which we don't like to talk about, when she says, change the thought and you'll change the reality. Many master teachers have said that in 100 different ways. Change the thought and we change the reality. Seems simple enough, easy. We often have that age-old phrase in our language that says, what is. And that leaves us feeling pretty empty, right? It's as if we have to see what is and face it, struggle with it. We don't like it much. Several years ago, I wanted to change that. And I now say, it is what it is until it isn't. Because truly, it is what it is in this moment, but right after this moment is something new. And I have the ability to change my thought, therefore change reality. So it is what it is until it isn't anymore. It's interesting to note that we define reality as what is. But I'm going to help you unlearn something today. I want you to really just be pretty unrealistic with me for a moment. What is doesn't mean much. It is a point at which the greater part of you begins the journey into what's coming, what you're becoming. We have a phrase in New Thought that says, like unto itself is drawn. It's that point of attraction, that thought that you have that is calling forth something new, calling you forth to become the greater part of who and what you are. And so what is in this moment is actually based on a thought moments ago. It's no longer. You're already on to the next thing. We call ourselves great multitaskers. That's not really true. But pretend with me for a moment that you've had a thought. I have a thought I want to walk to the piano. By the time I get there, that thought is 3 seconds old. The reality of it began here. And by the time I get over there, it's like stale bread. It's a new reality over there. If you're reading the book with the study group, you might remember the story about Brian and Wynn. They were the newlyweds who went to a What If Up supper club, and they were living the life. They had a great home, and they began to what if up, and just out of nowhere came this thought, what if we sold our great dream home and bought a new great dream home? And the short story is that's what happened. We often think that, like Brian and Wynn, we have to know how to do that. We have to know when it's going to happen, where the money's going to come from, who's going to bring it. We have to know all the details because we are fixers, we are planners, we are strategists. I'm going to help you unlearn something today, and that is going to make your life all the more simple. All of those questions I just asked, especially that great big how question, how's it going to work out? How's this going to happen? How am I going to raise the funds? Hear me when I tell you, how is rarely any of your business in the moment. In your current physical reality, how is none of your business because it doesn't live here and now. If you are living here and now fully and completely, and it's not here, it's not yours to do yet. I've been teaching my clients for a long time exactly what Brian and Wynn learned in that What If Supper Club. There's only 2 questions to ever ask. What do I want, and why do I want it? What do I want begins that very point of attraction. That first thought becomes, through your imagination and through the discernment of wisdom, a greater understanding of what you want. You get pretty general at first and then more specific. I used to sell real estate for a living, and that's never been in a bio, has it? Okay, I should add that one next time. So I sold real estate for like 10 years, past life. I had phone calls all the time of people saying, I want to buy a house. Great. There's only 160,000 of them I could show you today. Let's get a little more specific. Let's talk about You want 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a dishwasher. Begin to get a little more specific. Now tell me why you want that kind of house. And then I know how to help you all the more. Because I have kids, because I like this school district, because we have a dog and it needs a backyard, blah, 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 blah. The question of how am I going to afford it, or when is it going to come, or who's going to bring it, none of their business in that moment. They get all the more specific on what they want and why they want it. I can come help them and answer those questions. Now look on the outside of that. The universe is like your realtor. If you get really clear on what you want in this life, and I'm not talking about materialistic things, it may just be harmony or peace in your relationship. It may be health. It may be a greater sense of who you are. And you ask, what is it that I want? And you get clear on why you want it. Then you open yourself to that great universal realtor that comes in and says, let me show you how that can happen. But so often we get stuck on who's going to bring it, where is it going to come from, how's it going to show up. And here's what happens. If I get clear on what I want, and I say this is why I want it, there's a straight path. But if I get hung up on who's going to bring it and someone else brings it, I begin the argument with that someone else, and I get stuck right there. If I ask the question, where's it going to come from, and it comes from a different source, I get stuck there arguing, but it was supposed to come from over there. Is it making sense? Those other questions become the roadblocks. They stop us in our tracks. We become stagnant. If you only ask, what do I want and why do I want it? It's just like Brian and Wynn in that story. They just what-ifed up, and it showed up. Dee mentioned that I brought today some new products. I just launched this new merchandise line, and I'm very excited about it. I've been, as you know, in the death and dying business for some time. That's odd to say, but that's what I do. And I am on the other side of that in how I minister to those dealing with grief. And I noticed that over and over and over, people would show up and say, you know, I got a house full of flowers, and that was lovely. But the reality is they all ended up on the dining room table, and I had to watch them die as well. I had people coming in and saying, I got this card from a friend, and it had a Bible verse that had absolutely nothing to do with anything else. And so I thought, why don't I just create something that is more affirming, that resonates with us as healers? I began to get clear on what I wanted, and I understood why I wanted it, and then I just dropped the plan. I didn't know how it was going to manifest. I didn't know where it was going to come from. I didn't know who was going to print this. I didn't know where I was going to get the money to do it. And as of next week, it will launch. I still don't understand exactly how that happened, and it's none of my business until it does. Dee mentioned I will have those available after service today. I've put together these sympathy cards that look different, feel different than most. And interestingly enough, you may be thinking, wonderful, I'll purchase some cards or at least go look at them. The greater reality is they're still not done. I'm going to be selling cards to you today that are not complete. So what is the reality of it? It doesn't live right now. It lives next week. Isn't that interesting? I'm going to sell you not done. I also have been looking at how we honor that path of giving ourselves permission to simply be in the moment of knowing what we want and why we want it, and then letting everything else go. And some people get so spooked by the possibility of their dreams coming true that they launch what Mindy calls inner saboteurs. We all do it all the time. She talks about 3 such saboteurs, and the first one is called the inner realist, and she says that inner realist intends to serve a positive purpose, but rather it puts us in a current reality, but in the past. Remember when I was going to walk to the piano? By the time I got there, it would have been in the past. It takes our ideas and it assesses the feasibility of them. There's an objective, and it prevents us from flowing. You know, I didn't grow up with John Lennon, but I admire him greatly. And I have a book of some of his famous quotes. And one of my favorites is, I think, something that we can all kind of live into once in a while. When he said, "Part of me suspects I'm a loser, and part of me thinks I am God Almighty." It's interesting that he also said, reality leaves a lot to the imagination. And that's what we're talking about. That imagination piece of us, our greatest spiritual tool, the very foundation of who and what we are, whether it's as a child or as our childlike mind, to just wonder, to just what if in the right direction. She talks about the second kind of saboteur, which she calls the warden. And I love that because we live in that one a lot. The warden only exists when we imprison ourselves in our limitation. The warden's not a bad guy. It's just that he punishes everyone who's not doing what they're supposed to do. And it keeps us confined, imprisoned in that moment. And the what if up process liberates you from that, doesn't it? It frees you up. It lifts your thoughts above that piece of judgment that says you should not, or you should do it this way. And the third kind of saboteur that she mentions is the strategist. I just talked about that a little bit. The strategist is, as we think, an ally. It puts everything in place. It creates the plan. And we often talk in our language about this gap, because if I don't know the plan, I don't know how to get there. We often talk about the generation gap, but I'm here to tell you there's no such thing as a generation gap. There is a vibrational gap. I have a neighbor who has a new grandson, and he was born internet ready. He doesn't have to learn all the stuff I'm still trying to learn. And it's interesting, if you have kids and grandkids this size, they just pick it up like that, right? There's no generation gap. It's vibrationally, that's who and what they are. That's how they came into this world of being. Charles Fillmore said, "The truth you know is the truth you use." I've said that 100 times in this place because I love it. It's so true. And if you capitalize the word truth, it makes total sense. The truth you know is the truth you use in this now moment. And what you believe in this now moment is your reality. But if you want a different reality, tell a different story. If you want a different reality, live into the new thought of what if upping. Charles Fillmore also said, imagination gives the man the ability to project himself through time and space and rise above all limitations. Let's go. There's no longer any need of the warden. So what makes reality seem real in this space right now happening is that we can touch it, right? We can know it. We can see it and smell it and hear it. The truth is, what we are touching and seeing and smelling and hearing is the reality that has just happened. It's already been manifest. The greater reality is the vibration that brought it forth. The vibration that brought it forth. the imagination, the thought, and feeling our way into it, and then we create it. We build it, and it becomes. Since I've been doing this work for a long time, I've noticed that I have become all the more sensitive to vibration. And unfortunately, we have a lot of fracking going on in Oklahoma. At least that's my story. I'm going to blame all of those earthquakes on fracking, because I need to blame it on something. And there are days when we'll have 3 or 4 earthquakes, and no one notices unless you're in my skin, and I feel every one of them. At my office, when you walk in, there's a receptionist, and then further down the hall, there's my assistant in one office. The next office is what I call the journey room. It's where I do counseling. And then in the corner office is my office. So 4 offices. And my assistant is often in my office for a meeting, and she'll leave her phone in her office 3 or 4 doors away on vibrate. And I'll say, your phone is ringing. And she'll say, I don't have it with me. Doesn't matter. The reality states your phone is ringing. I can feel it. She doesn't get it. I don't get it. I was at a seminar Thursday, and we sat in the back row. I was speaking at 11, and we were there like at 9 o'clock to listen to the other speakers. And I whispered, someone's phone is on vibrate in the first row. She just looks at me like I have 2 heads. Sure enough, they start reaching in their purse and grab it. When you can get to this place of knowing that reality isn't right here, this reality is the vibration instead, it's like you're floating on thin air. I mean, it's crazy what you feel and what you notice. Have you ever had those moments when you just knew the phone was going to ring? You just knew somebody was going to call you that day, or you were going to see them? You had them in your mind, in your imagination, and then they showed up? That's vibrational. I forgot my clicker, so if you'll go on to the next slide. Our scripture, if you have the daily word in front of you, it's on your bulletin. I pulled this particular daily word in this scripture because it's one that's been posted on my refrigerator for about 4 years. I love this particular daily word. And interestingly enough, it was written, get this, in 1940. How long ago was that? 74 years ago. I really want you to look at that again today, read it again. It's really interesting that as I was thinking about what to talk about, there it was on my refrigerator, the one place I go to all day, every day. Reality. That was the daily word 70-some years ago. And it's still truth. And the scripture says, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. When you look and read and study this, you could do an entire sermon series on every one of these particular sentences. It's that poignant. 74 years ago, all the way to today. Charles Fillmore said, there is an invisible thought stuff. Yes, those were his words. There is an invisible thought stuff on which the mind acts, making things through the operation of law not yet fully understood by us. And every thought moves upon this invisible substance in increasing and diminishing degree. And when we praise the richness and fullness of God, this thought stuff is tremendously increased in our mental atmosphere. You know, there's nothing about this physical world that is not spirit-based. Nothing. If you've watched those movies like What the Bleep, or you've studied any sort of quantum physics, you know that this thing doesn't even exist. This is just matter. It's here. We've created a great story about it. We've built it. And yet, it's just atoms and molecules formed in our mind. None of that makes sense because I can touch it, I can see it. If I put my tongue to it, I could taste it. It seems real, but the thing is, it was real way before it became real. It happened way before it was actually manifest. I want to go back to that quote that Albert Einstein used. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And everything that you see is an illusion. Everything that you're experiencing is an illusion. And the illusion can be whatever you choose it to be. So if you continue to have a thought, feeling your way into the belief that it is anything but good, it will continue to be anything but good. But if you change your thought and what if up, it too must change. I wanted to know what our co-founder in Unity, Charles Fillmore, thought about reality, because I doubt he wrote this daily word. But this is what he said reality was. He says, divine mind is the one and only reality. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High, divine mind, that super consciousness, that God of our being, the very universe itself flowing in and through us. So, this book, I hope, has made sense to you. I've read it like 4 or 5 times, and it continues to be these little nuggets that just jump out at me. And the what if plan is not really a plan at all. It's not a goal, it's not an objective, it's simply an idea. It's a thought where everything begins. And just as thought, just as idea, just as imagination, it has no limits. Just as you has no limits. You create your own reality moment by moment, breath by breath, thought by thought. And we are in this time of what we call the awakening. And if we can awaken to the understanding that we are first vibrational beings that then manifest, we live into the greater awareness that that which we want wants us. Rumi said that. If you get clear on what you want and you get clear on why you want it, the why is irrelevant, and yet it leads you in the direction, the right direction, the up direction. It's not who you are that's holding you back. It's who you think you are not. So get clear on who you are, not on who you're not. And I hope that you will take this with a grain of salt and understand it as I intend it to be. I want you to just forget about what is, because it is what it is until it isn't anymore. Be more focused on that which you want. Since we cannot change reality except when we change our thoughts, let's change the eyes in which we see reality. Let's change the ears in which we hear reality. We have a choice every moment. We can live a reality-based expression in an old way of knowing reality. Or we can begin to live into a very unrealistic way of being. It's actually happening all around us. In 2.5 weeks, there are going to be tens of thousands of people get on an airplane and travel all over this country and the world for a turkey dinner. That is totally unrealistic. And yet it happens every single November. If we could live into the understanding that unrealistic life is our point of vibrating what we want and how we want to feel, it's not about the turkey dinner. It's about how I want to be in expression with my family and loved ones. It's how I want to feel in their presence. It could be good or bad. It's up to you. Some of you may think I'm in denial. I get that. I've had clients say you're totally in denial about this reality-based living because it's all that's happening. But I would close with this. I don't think I'm in denial. I'm just really selective about the reality that I accept. Breathe that in. Know that, because there is choice. Thank you so much for having me. God bless.